People, when did you know it was over? I returned home at 6:25 a.m. this weekend after going on a work trip. I sat quietly in the living room watching TV because I didn't want to wake her and the kids. A few minutes later, I received a text from her saying, "Thanks for staying over, babe. I love sleeping next to you. I'm still on the couch and haven't responded." So I assumed she went back to sleep and didn't realize she had accidentally texted me Monday. Number one, I had to go to work before confronting her, but I think it was better anyhow because it gave me time to think before I would be angry. Secondly, I asked my assistant to check the 7-Eleven next door to see if they had China Bock. If not, I'll ask him about it. As for Publix for science number 3, she eventually texted me while I was at work to let me know that her girlfriend had slept over. I don't reply at 300 p.m. Tuesday, EST number 1. I went out to dinner with one of my co-workers last night. Number 2, I didn't speak to my wife at all when I went to bed in the morning. I brought up the text when I woke up and told her that I was surprised she would use such language with a girlfriend. Number 3, she broke down and confessed that she had a platonic girlfriend and a less than platonic ex-boyfriend over while I was away. Number 4, she acknowledged that it wasn't the first time. Number 5, I calmly told her that I would have to consider how I feel. About a couple of years ago, I noticed that my then-wife had started acting strangely at night. She would stay up late, even after I was in bed, and she always had a phone with her, even going to the bathroom and walking from the living room to the kitchen. Obviously, this caught my attention because she had never acted like this in the 4 years that I had been married. I looked at her phone bill to see if she was texting anyone, and to my horror, I discovered hundreds and hundreds of texts sent to the same number every night, usually starting around the time we would go to bed, plus probably 15 to 20 picture messages each night. I cross-referenced the phone number she had been texting, and it was nobody I knew. This puts an end to all of her family members and close friends, because I have all of their numbers saved on my phone as well. My next course of action is to try to steal her phone and read her text messages, which is difficult because she keeps a close eye on it. However, after a few days, I finally managed to get my hands on it, and when I did, I discovered that her entire inbox was completely empty. She was deleting all of her texts throughout the day. What was she hiding? I looked through her photos to see if I could find anything scandalous, but I got the same result. All of her pics were erased. I put the phone back and planned my next move. Being the resourceful man that I am, I downloaded a basic file recovery program and waited for the right moment to strike. She had developed a habit of going to bed at around 2:00 a.m. and sleeping with the phone under her pillow once more, a behavior she had never displayed at any other point during our marriage, so I waited for her to go to sleep. Then I carefully took the phone out of her pillow without waking her up. This probably took me 20 minutes. I then rushed into the other room and began using the file recovery software, praying that I would find thousands of pictures of a dog and nothing else. The scan took more than 10 minutes, and as you can imagine, it felt more like 10 hours. At any moment, my heart was racing, so I went back into the room and replaced her phone. After the scan was finished, I went back to the computer to assess the damage, and essentially that's when my heart fell out of my chest. Hundreds of pictures of my wife. It took me 3 days to gather the courage to tell her that I knew what was going on and that I wanted a divorce, but when I read the line, "Thanks for staying over, babe. I love sleeping next to you," I got that exact same feeling again. I suppose that's why I felt compelled to share the cheer story of the 3 daughters of a mother who cheated here. I've never felt so sick in my entire life. I realized that she had taken some of them to places where we went on dates, like the restroom of a restaurant we were at. How many other people have experienced this as well? In my early 20s, I was still living at home, and I used to tell my ex-boyfriend that I thought my mom was cheating on my stepfather. My darling ex called me paranoid, but in the end, it turned out to be true. She met a man online in a forum for an author that they both like, and they carried it over to real life. They used to spend nights up the coast together, and my stepfather would actually pay for her to go away for a night by the beach in a run, which I thought was pretty cool. However, she wasn't resting, as she began to obsess over her email, hiding it like crazy, and one day I was minimizing her email to look up something for school, and the words, "I would love to leave my husband for you," jumped out at me. To me, then my biological father, who was aware of the fact that I detested being in that situation as well. She had 2 sons, one of whom was only 4 years old, and I was the eldest. I did the only thing I could think of doing, which was to print her emails to him in case of a custody dispute. I've also began emailing this man directly, and she would tell me that I would make this, or our family would disintegrate because of my spiteful emails. We were angry and hurt, and we had to put up with her bipolar, yelling, and oppressive behavior for a very long time. On my stepfather's birthday, he asked his wife to stop relying on him. My stepfather was a wonderful mom, and one night she called me to tell me that they were divorcing. I was devastated, but eventually my mother realized her mistakes and gained enough perspective to understand what her life would be like on her own. She tried to get back together with my stepfather, but her depression set in, and she literally wasted away and committed suicide. I loved my mother, a stunning woman who caused a lot of hurt, grief, love, and joy, but every emotion she evoked and others were 1,000 times more explosive than that of other people. For when I was 14, my father caught my mother cheating for the 3rd time. This had happened twice before when I was 8, and when I was 12 the times before he would always talk to me and my siblings individually and explained what had happened. He would tell us that they might get a divorce, but he would try and get out for us, because she didn't have a great father and he didn't want us to grow up in our own like he did. He was an immigrant and came here illegally at 17, but he's legal now. Well, one day it finally came. The divorce was real. I remember telling him that he wouldn't be living with us anymore, that they were finally getting a divorce, and that he didn't care who I decided to live with, because he knew how much I loved my mother. He never treated her with disrespect, even after all she put him through, because she gave him the greatest gifts he could have asked for us when all was said and done. My 3 siblings, and I ended up with her father solely in the fact of how great of. The thing that most impressed me about my father's handling of the situation was how he trusted us with all the information, allowing us to make our own decisions, and how he respected my mother throughout it all. She would call him a piece of trash and a worthless carpenter, but he just took it, knowing that at all times we were watching. He explained to us that what he was doing was showing us a lesson that even when someone has done everything they can to hurt you, you still have certain people in your life that you have to be strong for, and you set a good example for us to respect others. My father's unwavering love and support throughout this entire ordeal is what made me stronger as a person. Please spend time with your kids every weekend, teach them to fish, or take them out for ice cream. The best way to show them you care, love them, and hug and hold them whenever you can is to keep things normal. As I mentioned earlier, I'm 16 years old and a high school debater. I've spent the entire summer at Dartmouth College at the nation's best debate to just make my dad proud. And I can say I'm going to college for free to show him that I'm using all the life skills he instilled in me. I suppose what I'm trying to say is that you shouldn't let anything that happens in your life affect you, your children, or your business. My father used to get asked by his co-workers how we managed to keep things together after a woman had taken nearly everything from him, and how he could continue to whistle as if nothing was wrong. When he told him mine, he would always say it was because, "I hope you will have the same mindset as my father, who had to be honest with his children." He wanted us to realize that you control your life and others can only ruin it if you let them. I have the utmost respect for men like you and my father, and I hope that one day you will be like the two of you. Story 5. The ex-girlfriend cheated on me. The sad thing is that I knew half of her college friends, so one night one of her friends told me she was seen around school holding hands with someone else. I didn't believe the friend because I assumed she was just causing trouble, but a few weeks later, another of her friends says the same thing involving the same guy. I told her to call me as soon as they were spotted kissing in the courtyard, and she did so a few weeks later. She told me they were having dinner outside, and she was about a block away, watching them for me like in an episode of Cheaters. I remember the terrified expression on her face as she was holding his hand across the table. I basically walked up right when they were in the middle of a hand lock, and she had nothing to say. So I turned to the date and asked, "What the hell are you doing with my girlfriend?" He couldn't think of anything to say, so I looked him in the eyes, and he knew that I could flip that table over at any moment. That evening she texted me more than 50 times, 20 of which were saying that she was sorry, that she loved me, etc. I never replied, and as far as I know, she died in an accident. Her friends tell me that she was in a relationship with the man for a few months before he decided to hurt her, and she ended up filing a police report. Story 6. She got engaged today. A year and a half later, at the start of my freshman year of college, Hannah and I started dating. She broke up with me essentially because she wasn't sure if she wanted a relationship, or at least not one with me. She was unhappy, didn't want to hold me back, and told me she wanted to be single at least until she was done with. After a year and a half of dating someone else from the college we both attended, I thought about asking Hannah if she would want to catch up after I got home from summer school. She was my first girlfriend, and I don't think I ever got over her. I was hoping to grab coffee or something to catch up and see if she still had feelings for me. The idea sounded good as I thought about it this morning, but when I checked Facebook, she had no relationship status since we broke up today, and I found that she was engaged to one of her good friends, who was apparently more recent than that. The honest response was, "What the heck?" As I said, this was unexpected, and she indicated that she wanted to concentrate more on her studies than my grandma, with whom I've always been very close, passed away yesterday, and now that she's graduated from college, she's engaged. This devastated me because, for me, getting dumped by a cheater was the best thing that ever happened to me. I was in the middle of moving to Mexico to be with a woman I'd been seeing for a few years, packing, cancelling utilities, saying goodbye to friends. And my small business was struggling due to neglect, a bad economy, and bad luck. So time was running behind schedule, but it was happening slowly. Real love always waits for the right time, so I spent most of my spare money whenever I could to spend time with her. But I had also saved up and sold off some things I didn't need. Was going to surprise her with a trip to Hawaii, which she loved, and a marriage proposal. When I got back with my next load of boxes, they even had a guy make a ring that I designed. So I went back to my old place to pack up more things one last time. While I was packing, she stopped answering calls and emails, and after a week of worrying me, she sent me a picture from Italy and apologized. It took some time to get the whole story. She had grown weary of waiting, met an Italian man online, and used his money to fly there to meet him. Presumably, the money she took from me helped as well. She spent a week with him before seeing another Italian guy. She also met him online and chose to be with him instead. She told me that she was in love with the first one and then the second, and I kind of stopped paying attention because I couldn't imagine how her mind was working. I was shocked that she could have done something so reckless or foolish and stunned by the timing. But even though I was stunned, I knew right away that I would have done anything for her just a week earlier. Wow, she went from being a future wife to a liar to a thief to a cheat, literally on all counts in 1 week. And I never got back a single piece of property that had been left in her home. However, it was worth the expense because the flying spaghetti monster started telling me right away that it wasn't meant to be, and my business significantly improved in the weeks and months that followed. Nothing new or different, amazing, good luck, a new big client, and a new surprise investor all in 6 weeks. I sold it, cashed out, and ended up so much richer than I had ever been in my life that I could easily start thinking about retiring to a beach somewhere. Even better, a month later, I met an amazing woman who was introduced by a mutual friend, and she turned out to be so right that if my ex saw her, she would hide from jealousy. My ex hated her own smallness and bad hair, but I didn't mind. A new girl, tall, blonde, incredibly beautiful, and even 10 years younger, is even better for me. She's sweet and honest, and it's worth all the time and attention I can give her. It's like the world has come together to show me how much better life can be. While not having children was fortunate, it would have made things harder. My advice would be to talk to your wife before getting a lawyer, moving assets, and starting a war. This is going to be a very emotional time for you both, and your actions over the next few months will determine the nature of your relationship with the mother of your children for the rest of your lives. I know the title of the thread is "When Did You Know for Sure That It Was Over?" And maybe you do know for sure that it is over. Additionally, there is a chance that this infidelity could serve as the catalyst for much-needed change in your marriage. When my marriage ended, I heard from a lot of people about their experiences with infidelity, many of which I was surprised to learn about. Many couples have gone through the same thing as you, and many have used it as a wake-up call that the amount of time and effort they were putting into their relationship was insufficient. This is not the easy way. Through work and counseling, you could have a more loving, committed relationship than ever before. It's also possible that this is impossible, and that's okay too. The important thing to understand is that you don't have to decide for today, this week, or even this month. Emotional reactions are your enemy at this point, so try to avoid making snap decisions and instead take slow, deliberate steps toward the life you want to have if there is no chance of reconciliation. It is still in your best interest to keep your relationship with your soon-to-be ex-wife as cordial as possible. Take the high road and act like a man. If you start a war at this point, there are only 2 winners in this situation: you and your ex-wife. The lawyers have a vested interest in persuading you to fight over everything, because every disagreement you have is time that can be charged to them. Any remaining goodwill between you and your ex will also be lost. This approach wastes your money and increases the bitterness you both feel at the expense of your children. Communicate honestly with your wife and listen even if you're mad. The only thing you can do is to realize that your relationship with your children and their well-being are far more important than who gets the good china. If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons for more videos like this one. I know that right now you're a huge ball of mixed emotions, including anger, confusion, fear, sadness, and up is down. However, if you love your wife and you don't think she's ever cheated before, then you can look back on this as a positive thing. I could go into a lot of detail about what caused my affair, but making a list would just sound like excuses, so I'll just say that if that text is what it seems to be, there are a lot of things that could have triggered what has happened to your marriage. To understand the affair's cause, counseling is needed. I spent a year in counseling to fully learn and understand the shortcomings in my life, many of which date back to my childhood, making me vulnerable to doing what I did. My wife stayed with me through many of the sessions, and even though she didn't have to, she chose to reach out and understand what I learned. I can't claim to have experienced the pain that my wife did, but when I saw and truly realized how much hurt I caused her, I would be lying if I said I didn't consider ending it all to make it stop over time and understanding. It took about a year, and we learn to communicate better than we ever had, and we're closer than ever before, and I would never ever dream of hurting her again. We have a relationship now, which I believe few couples ever get to, so it is possible to pull this together. Now, if you think that's even possible, here are my recommendations. Call your family or mutual friends, but you need a support system. If you don't have any friends you can really vent to right now that aren't shared with everyone, you'll get the best support from a psychiatrist. If she confirms an affair when questioned about the text, try your best to remain calm and tell her that you want the truth. She'll have a much harder time telling you the truth if you're on fire, but you want the truth. If you want to try to save things, don't try to have her make up an explanation on the spot. It's too easy to fumble your words and thoughts in those first few days. It's human nature to want to know every detail, including the size, the number of orgasms, the positions, and everything else. However, it's better to focus on the emotion that led to the affair rather than the specifics, because in the end, hearing details is like reading an intense novel. Your mind will paint a picture, and you will spend a year trying to get that picture out of your head. She needs to commit to you that he's gone forever, and she did this with my wife. She must realize right away that this was a huge mistake, and she must decide what's important. If she can't recognize her mistake right away, then your situation isn't the same as mine. I wish I could make the situation go away. I'm so sorry this happened to you, just as I'm so sorry I've ever hurt my wife. I'm the exception here, and I'm living proof that you can succeed in the end. Best of luck, man. Story 10. I was suspicious when she began transferring money to accounts that didn't have my name on them, so I installed the keylogger monitoring software on the laptop we shared. When she claimed to be going to the gym, I discovered it on Mother's Day 2010 and confronted her. I'm now divorced and an awesome single dad. It was difficult. I kept hurting myself by looking at the texts she was sending, and the Verizon websites selected the sent or received, but not the data. Ultimately, I had to walk away and realize that it was better not to know all the details beyond what I already knew. For my son, I changed my life after a civil court. If you ask me, story 11, as a wife who got CL and subsequently had fertility issues because of it for my cheating husband, I think the posters who have the strike hard and fast advice are completely correct. I wallowed in the emotional discovery and an IES once I found out that he went back to her after a month of marriage counseling. Some guy was in your bed, your space, your home, serving as the protector of your hearth. Exercise and enjoy life seriously, because it has made life much better for a little levity when they arrive. They're wild and wet, and when they depart, they take your house and car. And children her away on business, earning money to undoubtedly give her a lifestyle that you were proud to furnish. She used that as an opportunity to make you a shell of a man, as a divorced, insane person. I went through a lot of therapy to get to where I am now, and I've acted calmly and rationally. I dissolved the marriage like a bad business deal because I knew that, from that perspective, it saved my relationship with my children, who still felt loved and protected. Story 12. Despite the hurt, pain, anger, and feeling like you're not having any luck, there is life beyond that. After 2 years of a miserable marriage, he tried to blame me for everything. He even started telling friends and family that I had cheated on him with a friend of ours. Long story short, we got divorced, and as I'm trying to put my life back together and I'm finally feeling better about myself, I'm going through piles of papers and books, and I find one of his old notebooks that he used to keep with him every day for work and college classes. I never really gave them much thought, but I flicked one open without realizing what it was. Near the back, I find a large list of female names with phone numbers next to them, along with pages of dates and meetup times. These included things like Motel 8 Amanda 4:30 Saturday, May 30th, Amont MC Guy Susan 5 Friday, April 26th, and so on. I'm getting angry all over again just thinking about it. I never told him that I found that book, though, because I don't talk to him anymore. And I take all of us in the fact, knowing that he stooped low and cheated on me, but it never did to him. And I'm the better person for it. Story 13. My marriage has been going south for a while now, and I travel a lot for work. My wife became very close to the male volunteer who was going through a divorce around Christmas time, and I saw texts about it. I confronted her about their secret plans to meet up in January, and we split up in early May. Somehow, I ended up copying her in a text conversation about how much they enjoyed each other that morning, which is when I realized it was really over. Rather than being frustrated and self-righteous about her behavior, I'm seeing a therapist and taking responsibility for my part in why the relationship had deteriorated. It's much harder than just blaming her and moving on, but it's the right thing to do. I don't want the same thing to happen again if I do end up in another relationship, so even though it hurts a lot, the personal growth aspect of it will pay off greatly in the future. Hell, it already has for him. Story 14. I recall that an old friend of mine had gotten close to a guy I went to high school with. I mentioned that it made me uncomfortable because the guy obviously didn't like me. I worked a desk job from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m., so it was a little difficult to maintain a regular schedule. One night we got into a fight because I didn't get the promotion that would have changed my hours from 8 to 5 p.m. A couple nights later, as I was driving home, I saw the guy's truck parked down the street from my house. He picked up a phone and said hello, and I could hear her loudly in the background. I hung up right away and sat frozen in my driveway for about 20 minutes before she called me back to tell me they were just. Story 15. One Saturday, my husband's phone alarm goes off while he's asleep upstairs, and I'm downstairs with our 3-month-old because I don't want to wake her. Something tells me to check his texts, and I discover that he's seeing a co-worker who is half his age. She was 20 and he was 40. I confront him right away and discover that he's been seeing her since I was 7 months pregnant. Needless to say, the relationship ended when she became a single mother living at home without a job ever since. Confronted his girlfriend and introduced myself as his wife. When I mentioned her name, I said, "Oh, you're the one who's been intimate with my husband." We had other issues, so I wouldn't forgive him. I will admit that we should have never gotten married and that I was guilty of being a witch occasionally. I will also say that we should have gone through this. Don't fight in front of your kids. Get a lawyer. Talk to a few before you pick one document. Good luck. 16 years ago, my former boss, a successful local business owner, lost a significant amount of money in a divorce from his first wife. He kept his house and his business, but he lost half or more of his net worth in the fight. After the split, his girlfriend moved in with him, and he vowed never to marry her. He set about rebuilding his business and his fortunes 3 days shy of years after the split. The day she moved in, his lawyer reminded him that he would automatically remarry under common law in less than 72 hours. Apparently, he didn't need to explain this to my former boss. The following day, after his girlfriend left for work, he backed up a truck to the house he had owned for more than 30 years, told his staff to pack everything he owned into it as quickly as they could, rented an apartment, submitted a change of address to the USPS, waited for his crew to unload his belongings, and then, in my imagination, bought a 6-pack at the nearest store and had a few cold drinks in between. Story 17 happened to me once, but I didn't exactly the same way, so I trusted my instincts, looked at her computer, and moved out that day. I did the whole just stop talking to him, and we can work it out thing for about a month and a half. Good friends helped me. She was just in no good hope, and now that I think back on it, I realize that I had to go through this in order to understand it. My point is that it led me to 2 things. First, I finally gained the confidence to talk to a girl I had a crush on for 3 years, obviously because my relationship was flawed from the start, but I was the only one who didn't see it. And second, I recently got married to that same girl, whom I now call my wife, and she is the mother of my 5-week-old son. I love her and her son so much, and it literally went from 6 feet under to the top of the world. I couldn't even comprehend this to be true, but I felt compelled to let you know that I've been there, and that things will work out, bro. I didn't understand that, but only the worst could do that, especially if you have kids. I wish I had known about Reddit when I went through it, because it's a lot of help here. Good luck with everything, and don't try to work it out, because it will happen again. Story 18. As someone who discovered his ex-wife had cheated on him, I can tell you that sometimes a small detail that no one else would notice is the tip-off. In my case, it was my ex returning early from a trip to visit a friend who rang a bell. She worked for an airline and took off on weekends every month or so to visit family and friends, and she always took the last flight available to make the trip count. However, this one time, when I knew there were overflights from where she was visiting, she returned too early, and when her explanation didn't sound right, my BS meter went off, and I knew she had cheated. I can't tell you what it was, but I'm never sure. I then started to harass her because, sure as Al, she wasn't going to play the "it's all in your head" game with me, which she tried for a while, until I told her, "Okay, fine. Swear to me in your mother's health that this is all just in my head." She gave up, and I was happy. Later, I would find out that she had come early because the affair had made her realize she needed to keep our relationship together, as we had been drifting apart for months, and she took it as an opportunity to end things. Fortunately, we didn't have children, or things would have gone differently. I believe that apparently she spent a fair amount of time talking about me in her next SL Story 19, which is similar to many on here. That sick feeling that many of us have, which I also feel compelled to share, is what I like to call first girlfriend syndrome. Some people call it their first love, but I've seen it go wrong more often than not. Fortunately, I was young and unmarried when she realized she could manipulate me and get away with a lot of things. So I did some things that I'm not proud of, especially ignoring things that should have ended sooner rather than later. Some of the things included numerous reports of her going out to parties with another man, but none of it was actually seen, clearly leaving me out of social gatherings so that she could do what she wanted repeatedly, and placing herself in situations where I had to rely on her word and her word alone. One thing in particular that went wrong was when I got an errant text, like the op, that said she had the best intimacy with Bill last night, and I'm not Bill. She claimed that she had given her a toy name, and when a picture of her kissing another guy appeared, it was almost the last straw. I did the most regrettable thing I've ever done, and I blindly looked the other way and told myself that the next time I had to trust her, I'd end it. It didn't take long for her to go to a movie with a coworker, which isn't a big deal, but she stayed the night. When I asked her why, she told me that they went to a late show, and that wasn't a good enough excuse. She said that they had a few drinks and she couldn't drive, so she stayed on the couch. Story 20. I had a living boyfriend for a while, but I didn't want to admit it until I saw the picture. He had a girl all over his Facebook page, and even though I didn't know her personally, I knew the type of girl who tells herself she's in a relationship when she's not, is interested in the things the guy is interested in just to keep his attention, etc. In other words, he told her to back off, and for a while, everything was fine until they noticed that he was hooked up to his phone. One night, I got up to take some medication I had left in the kitchen and discovered his phone lit up with a text from her. I shouldn't have read it, but I did, and it goes without saying that he was sending inappropriate texts, mostly initiated by her, but he always reciprocated. Marched right into the bedroom, slapped him with a pillow, and told him to leave my house immediately. I was starting to throw stuff out after him, Jerry Springer style, at 2 in the morning. I have never felt so terrible in my life as I did after being cheated on. And to top it all off, the other girl was really, really ugly. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, I hope you will enjoy this, and I hope to see you in that video.